press along, faultless to stand before the throne. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand. On Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand. All other ground is sinking sand.
Beyond the sunset of blissful morning, when with our Savior heaven is begun, as toiling ended, oh glorious dawning. Beyond the sunset, when day is done, beyond the sunset, no clouds will gather, no storms will threaten, no fears annoy, O day of gladness, O day unending, beyond the sunset, eternal joy. Beyond the sunset, a hand will guide me to God the Father, whom I adore, His glorious presence, His words of welcome will be my portion on that fair shore. Beyond the sunset, oh glad reunion, when with our loved ones we'll weep no more, in that fair homeland we'll know no parting, beyond the sunset forevermore. From the south, from the north, from the east, from the west, all is well. Safely rest. God is nigh. Days are filled with sorrow and care. Hearts are lonely and dread. Burdens are lifted at Calvary. Jesus is very near. Burdens are lifted at Calvary. 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 Burdens are lifted
We want to thank God this morning for yet another wonderful opportunity that God has given us, that we may learn more about Jesus. As we are learning from the parables of Jesus, learning mainly on issues that has to do with Jesus and the formulation of perception, how Jesus is very, very vital and essential in our lives in formulating self-perception and perception about others. Yesterday we started and looked at the role of parables, especially from the Gospel of Luke, in formulation of perception. And we looked at many things. We are looking at the chapter of lostness. We looked at Luke chapter 15 on the concept of the lost sheep. We looked at the lost sheep as those who are lost in the wilderness, are people who are lost in the world. We also looked at the lost coin. These are people who are lost in the right places. But in these right places, we saw a dichotomous, a strange thing, a hybrid form of dark spaces in the right places. That being in the right place does not guarantee salvation, because even in the right places, there are dark corners. Even in the right places, there are also dirty places, and one has to navigate themselves carefully, even in the right place. That one is out of the world and now living the life of the church is not of itself and in itself a guarantee of salvation. So we looked at these formulations of perceptions, so that when one then decides to get into the life of the church, they get into the life of the church knowing exactly what to expect and exactly what is going on. And this comes in from the parables of Jesus. This morning I want us again to focus on Luke chapter 15, and I want us to read verse 11. And I'm hoping that throughout this week, as we'll be meeting each and every morning, we'll be able to get out of Luke chapter 15. I'm looking forward to the parable of the Good Samaritan. Again, powerful parable. So I'm looking forward that we'll do this quickly each and every morning and then move to the parable of the Good Samaritan. I want us to look at and focus on Luke chapter 15 and focus on a title or a discussion that is a title that says imitation is limitation. That is the subject of discussion for this morning. Imitation is limitation. We are looking at Luke chapter 15, verse 11, and I'll read verse 11, and I'm using a New Revised Standard Version. Luke chapter 15, verse 11. And Jesus then said, and this is the parable of the prodigal sons. And I've said that deliberately, not prodigal son, but the prodigal sons. The first parable has looked at the lost sheep. The second parable has looked at the lost coin. The third and fourth parable looks at the lost sons, starting with the younger son who went away, and then ending with the older son who never went away, but without going away, equally in a state of lostfulness, in a state of being lost, but then again without going away. So let's read verse 11. The Bible then says, then Jesus said, there was a man who had two sons, and God bless the reading of his word. This is one passage that I've preached on. You check on YouTube, you see sermons that I've done on this passage, looking at the idea of binary oppositions again. We highlighted a little bit of that yesterday. But this morning I want us to look at another aspect of this passage. But before we get deep into the passage, let us pause for a word of prayer. Father God, we are thankful. Now as we open your word, now as we have opened your word, we pray that you may continue to speak to us as young people in things that are very important in our lives, especially on issues on how we see things, in constructing our forms of perception and reality. Help us. And may Jesus be ever near and And may Jesus be the framework upon which we look at everything. In your name we pray, amen. I want to thank God. I enjoy teaching more than preaching. And this opportunity to be able to teach each and every morning is something that I grab on with gladness in my heart. Now, let's look at the passage. As I highlighted, many times when I present on this, I emphasize the idea of a certain man had two sons, and I run with the idea of dualism, of two representing the God's concept and celebration of diversity. We highlighted this yesterday morning also when we looked at how God celebrates diversity and how it is heavenly to do things in a different way, and how it is also satanic to push an agenda of sameness. We highlighted that sameness is always satanic, and to do things differently highlights aspects of the divine. But I don't want us to focus on that part, because this is what we concluded with yesterday. I want us to look at this idea of a man who had sons. A certain man had sons. Now, the moment you hear man and the moment you hear sons, what then kicks in right on the onset is what is known as a hierarchical structure. Within a hierarchical structure, you find two issues: roles and function. Roles and function. And everything works according to hierarchical structures. There has to be a structure, but this structure determines a classification. What's on number one, what's on number two, what's on number three, what's on number four. So for things to function within a society, functional society, societies where things work, they are hierarchical structures. Homes where things work, they're hierarchical structures. And people who've got their life working, despite the struggle, but people who have got their life working, things going on in place, they also have a hierarchical structure. One of the things that shocked me here in Germany is just about everyone has a to-do list. Just about everyone. Where you go, everyone has a, not everyone of course, but many people, the majority of people have a to-do list, that each and every day they've got a to-do list, and this to-do list tabulates the hierarchical structure of duties that are supposed to be executed in a day. The important things being done first, the less important things coming up later. So there has to be a hierarchical structure which then determines what needs to be done, the function and the roles that then come into place. I remember when I was a student at Solusi University, depending with which degree you were one who was partaking on, there was always a phrase that was reiterated over and over again. And this phrase highlighted what someone would be doing. So let's say if your core degree was in finance, then they would say you are a finance major. That is to say, your major focus of area is finance. Yeah? If you were doing theology, and then again, your main major would be theology. But then there were some people who would also take in courses from other faculties, to rebuttress their major. So you'd find, for example, someone who was majoring in finance would take what is known as a minor. This is a minor degree. This is a certificate. This is a diploma. A minor in agriculture. And this obviously gives an added advantage in that when you're done with finance, you have a minor in agriculture. It's so easy for you to become agronomist who can work as a finance person in an agronomical area, in agricultural area. I think that's the proper phrase. And there are people like me who would then, crazy people like me who would do what is known as double major. That is, you are taking in 2 degrees at the same time. So you've got your first major and you've got your second major. And I remember throughout Solusi, when I was a student at Solusi, every semester, all my courses were divided. I'll do half courses in theology and half courses in English language and literature. Each and every semester was like that because I was majoring in 2 majors, yeah. But there are some people again who would do a major and a minor. Now, many a times there was this phrase that people always reiterate, that you are now majoring in your minors and minoring in your majors. That is to say, within the hierarchical structure and within the performance of activity during the day, one did not concentrate on things that are of greater importance. The effort that was put on what needed less effort was much more, such that the outcome then was also compromised, in that one then became successful in the small things and failed in the important things. So people then many times would say you are majoring in your minors. The idea of having a hierarchical structure of what you do in your life or what you do with your life has to do with putting in a structure that then defines the important things, and then the less important things, and then the lesser important things coming in place. I don't know if you've seen this example, an illustration. You go on YouTube, you find it of a person who's got huge rocks, and then there is sand, and then there is water, and then there are less things, and then the rocks, the pieces of rocks are the important things of life, and then the sand are the less important things of life, and then the water are the lesser important things of life. When the person tried to put, now they're told to put these things in a jar. Now, when they try to put these things in a jar, when you start by putting in sand, and then you put in water, the water spills out. By the time you put in the rocks don't fit in. Why? Because of how someone would have started this whole exercise. So within this illustration, the professor then takes in the rocks and puts it first. After putting the rocks and they fit in nicely, he then takes the sand and pours it to cover the gaps that the rocks did not cover. And the sand then perfectly fits. And then the teacher or the professor then takes the water and then it fills and then is able to close. And the illustration illustrates the idea that when you start with the important things and move on to the less important things and move on even to the less important things, your life will be structured well. So a certain man had 2 sons. Suggests that within this family, there is a father, right? That is a role. That also determines function. And then there is an older brother. That is a role. That also determines function. And then there is also a younger brother. That is a role that also then determines function. And within these roles, friends, you find function. They are functional. When we don't have roles within society, when we don't have hierarchical structures within society, society crumbles. I'm thinking about the last verse in the book of Judges. And there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. Friends, what I'm trying to highlight this morning with this passage is to highlight that in life, we must have hierarchical structures where there are things that are further things in your life, important things in your life. There are brotherly things in your life, and there are last-born things in your life. The important things must always come first. And then again, that is also somewhat forced. But let's move on. A certain guy called Abraham Maslow in the late 60s came up with what is now known within social sciences as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Within this hierarchy of needs, Maslow was trying to, after studying what he thought was the lives of influential people, the lives of people who had achieved, trying to see how they structured their lives, he came up with something that is now known as a hierarchy of needs. And within this hierarchy of needs, there is something that is called self-actualization, which is on top. It is like a pyramid. And then there is self-actualization at the top. After self-actualization, then there is something that is called esteem, that comes number 2. And then after esteem, number 3, there is love and belonging. After love and belonging, on the 4th place, there is safety. And then last but not least, there is physiological needs. And I saw someone then added also at the bottom of the pyramid and wrote Wi-Fi. Yeah, Wi-Fi has also become one of the needs for the world today. Now, within this idea of self-actualization, to know who you are, the idea of self-actualization, even within social sciences, Maslow then highlights that at the top, at the top of that pyramid, where there is self-actualization, within that bracket of self-actualization, there is something that is called God. There is something that is called morality. There is something that is called self-perception. So friends, a certain man again had two sons. This is a man, and there's a structure that we find within his family. There is a man who's on top, there is a brother, older brother who comes in, and there is a young brother who comes in last. And this is what we find Abraham Maslow trying to also do, come up with a hierarchical structure of needs. And within these needs, he then says a father, a son, and a son. Now, these sons are able to identify themselves with their father. Okay, I'll break it down. These sons are able to identify themselves with their father. A certain man had sons. Yeah, he's a man who has sons. Now, there are limiting factors within this narrative. We are not told about the mother, we are not told about the daughters. Not that they are not in the picture of society, but within this narrative, there are limitations. We are focusing just on the father who had sons. Now, his sons can identify themselves with the father. What does that mean? So his name is Blessing, but whose son is he? Oh, he's a son of Nyahuma, because there are so many blessings. Many people are called blessings. But which one out of the many blessings that we find in Zimbabwe? Oh, we are talking about this one, the Nyahuma one. Yeah, the son of Nyahuma. Why? Because identity is then derived from those things that gives us the structure. Yeah, identity formulation and perception. So our surname then becomes part and parcel of what then identifies us. So we can then simply say we are the sons of our fathers. A certain man had sons. That is to suggest that there is structure that is coming in there. Now, then this structure then gives identity. And this is what we want to talk about. Imitation is limitation. We want to talk about the concept of identity. The moment you say a certain man had sons, you have identified. How have you identified? You have identified according to gender. You have identified according to roles. Gender and roles. The first thing that has come in place is the gender of the persons under discussion becomes a point of identification. Murume, mukadzi, vana, ndibaba. All these things are identity features. A certain man had two sons. Now, what you find there is sons are sons and the father is the father. Never the twain shall meet. But what we then find is there's no mixture in identity here. Like what we find in the book of Genesis when we talk about when Jacob went to his father, again, sons and fathers. When Jacob went to his father and asked, because the father had said he wants to bless his children before he died and then give them an inheritance. And this is what we are also talking about in the story of the prodigal son. So what we then find is that Jacob goes to his father and the father said, "Are you Esau, my son?" And Jacob said, "Yeah, well, it is me, your son." And the father said, "How is it that you found it so quickly?" And then Jacob said, "No, your God was with me." And you know how the story goes. What I'm interested in this passage is when then the father then says, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the arms are the arms of Esau. There you find a mixed identity. What is being said and what is being represented are worlds apart. There you have a mixed identity. There is a crossing in of boundaries there. A certain man had sons. That is very clear. It's not a certain sons who have a father, which is also very true. But it's not these sons who are also fathers. These sons, their role and their duty and their position within the hierarchical structure is they are sons. There are things that are expected of sons. There are things that are expected of fathers to do. Friends, we want to talk about identity, that within this structure of Luke chapter 15 verse 11, we find aspects of identity kicking in the first place. The first thing that comes in is the gender of the persons discussed comes in. Did you know, friends, that your gender is also an identity marker? Your race is also an identity marker. I want us to look at 6 things: gender, race, religion, career, profession, and marital status. All these are identity markers. No matter who you are, you can actually be identified by these 6 things. Now, there are aspects that are visible, that you can't hide. Visible aspects in the business of gender, in the business of identity. The first thing that is important is your gender and your race. Your gender and your race are very, very important. A certain man had sons. That is to suggest they have roles and they have duties. There are roles that the father must do. There are roles that sons must do. There are duties that are expected of the father. There are duties that are expected of sons. Why? Because with their identity, we can literally look at what they are supposed to do. So within this identity, when we talk about identity, there are visible markers of identity. And within these visible markers of identity, in them, there is ascribed behavior that must then follow. For example, your gender is your number plate. You are a girl, you must become a young lady, and then become a mother, and then become a grandmother. Okay? It goes like that. When you are a young man, you are a boy, you must become a gentleman or a young man. And then from being a young man, then you become a father. And after being a father, you become a grandfather. And if you are into African traditional religions, and then you become an ancestor. But these roles that then come in with identity throughout are not arrived at in the moment. They are not arrived at in the instant. They are processes that then happens, that then determines. So there is a formulation stage. Today you are a youth. That is the time when this formulation and sedimentation is happening. You are a boy, but you will not remain a boy. You are a girl, a young boy. You will not remain like that. Why? Because as life moves on, in the words of Robert Frost, as life moves on, there is a formulation of identity that will then solidify in the near future. You will not remain a young man. You will not remain a young lady. Soon you'll be a lady, and soon you'll be a gentleman. After these stages, soon you'll be a father, and soon you'll be a mother. The kind of father you're going to become and the kind of mother you're going to become are not things that will be arrived at as an instant or as an accident. These are things that will then come in because of the process that you put in and the efforts that you put in, so that you then solidify. So friends, I want to ask a question whilst we are on this idea of identity on gender, that you also may need to think about: what kind of father are you going to become when years have gone by? What kind of mother are you going to become when years have gone by? Some of us, or some of you, are left with a few years before you become a father. Some of you are left with a few months before you become a mother. You know where you are, but soon and very soon, life is moving on, and soon and very soon, some child will be calling you as their mother, and some child will be saying, "Look at my father," pointing to you. Why? Because these are forms of identity that then comes with responsibilities, and that then comes with roles. But now, friends, we are living in a world, especially for us as young people, we understand this much better. We are living in a world where there is an identity crisis, where people don't know who they are, and where the world is going is catastrophic and apocalyptic, in that there is an identity crisis. We are living in a world where during our time it was clear: you are a boy, you become a man, you become a father. There was no gender crisis. These are boys, these are girls. There are things that are expected of girls, there are things that are expected of girls, of boys and girls. But we're living in a world where now the world has now what is known as queer theories, queer theories, and within queer methodologies, you find that you no longer have two genders. There are now many genders. There is the gender that we know where there is a man and a woman, he and she. That is known. But now we are living in a world that has now so many genders. There are some who are called an agender. Not A-G-E-N-D-A, but agender as in A-G-E-N-D-E-R. These are people who are genderless. They are without a gender. They are not men, they are not women, they are it. That's how they're that's the designation. They are it. IT. We have a group of people now who are also bi-gender. That is to say, it depends. It fluctuates. Sometimes he's a she and sometimes she's a he. It's agender or bi-gender. It fluctuates, So in our time, during my time, we had a Mr., we had a Mrs., and then we had a Miss. But now there is a Mr., there is a Miss, there is a Mrs., and then there is a mix. There is a mix. During our time, we had a he and a she. That was clear. But now in your time, there is he, there is she, there is it, there is a z, there is the ear. All these are trying to then identify. Why? Because the world is in an identity crisis where the things that we had always known in binary opposition, that there is a man, there is a woman, have changed. Now there is a man, there is a woman, there is it. Now there is a he and there is a she, there is a it. Where there was a Mr. and a Mrs. and a Miss, there is now a Mr., Mrs., Miss, and mix. Why? Because the world is now in a confused state in the business of identity. And very soon, as a young person, you need also to define, and you need to have this actualization of knowing who you are. Are you a he? Are you a she? Are you a it? Are you a Mr.? Are you a Mrs.? Are you a Miss? Are you a mix? Are you who is a she sometimes, or are you a she who's a who sometimes, who's a he sometimes? And these are things that are very important in the business of identity. You need to know who you are. And the Bible comes in place and says a certain man had sons. There is a clear identity. There is a certain man and there is a certain sons. There are certain sons. Within these sons, they are also then classified. There is one who's older and there is one that is younger. Apart from gender, friends, remember gender is the number plate for all of us. People will know you by your gender. Your gender is your number plate. When you walk, they say, oh, there's a woman, there is a young girl, there is a young lady. Or when you walk, they say, oh, there's a young man, there is a gentleman. They can see these are number plates. Apart from gender identification forms, there is also race identification forms. And never think that these things are not important. They are very important in ascribing identity. And then they go even deeper to then give us what we know as roles and then functions. So when we start talking about race and gender, we are engaging in a narrative of structures of contempt. Why? Because the moment we are a gender that is identified with a man, there are stereotypes of contempt that also goes transfixed with men. It is the same when you're identified as a woman, as a lady. There are stereotypes which fall into the bracket of structures of contempt that they are identified with women. So we have heard many times, why? Because you are identifying a certain gender, and then within this certain gender, there are then structures of contempt that then goes on. Again, it is coming in within the gender narrative. And within this gender narrative, we find structures of contempt. But apart from this, there comes in something that is now called race. Besides being a man and besides being a woman, the moment we add in race, gender also, identity then also becomes solidified. So you're a man, you're not just a man, a black man. Things are changing. You're not just a woman, but you're a black woman. Things are changing. I know one Hollywood actor by the name of Morgan Freeman, he has come out many times that he has refused to be identified as a black man. He says, I'm not a black man, I'm just a man. He refuses ascribing of race to his identity. Why? Because the moment his race is ascribed to his identity, it comes in loaded with structures of contempt. But the Bible here tells us, friends, that there was a certain man who had sons. Very clear, not on the borderline. Now, friends, within identity, there comes in something that is called behavior. In case you don't know what we are talking about, I'm talking about the perceptions of self that must be formulated when you are a young person. The perceptions of self that must be formulated through the framework of Jesus in formulating an identity that will then stand the test of time. Very early in your life as a young person, you need to have a formulation of identity. You need to discover who you are. You need to find out who you are, and you need to structure who you are. And then aim into life with this who that you are and carrying this identity that you are. And some of the things that will help in you being identified as you are things that are outside or that are beyond your control. To be born a man, to be born a woman, to be born an African, to be born a black man, to be born a black woman. Those are things that are beyond your control. They just come as gifts of nature. If we were to choose, probably some would have decided to be born otherwise, because of how then the world perceives and the value that the world puts in these things. So within the identity of race, the narrative then also changes, especially for us who are now living in a world that has become a global village, when the probability of you talking to someone who is thousands of kilometers away is at the tip of is at the reach of your mobile phone. You just need to press in a few buttons. You're talking to someone who's in America, you're talking to someone who's in the Philippines. So friends, within this idea of race, there comes in behavior, there comes in also identity. A nasty story is told about I think it's a parable, satire, about a German, an American, a British, a Chinese, and an African. They went to God, and God said, come, my 5 children, I want to give you whatever that you are going to ask for. So I'm going to start with you, the American. What would you want me to do, and I'll do it for you? Just name one thing that you want, and then I'll do it for you. And the American said, Lord God, may you please give me military power. Give me military power and dominance for the rest of my life. And God says, your request has been granted. I've given you military power. I've given you dominance. Go, and what you have asked shall be. The German then also came and said, and God said, what shall I do to you, my son, German? And the German then said, I want industrial power to be able to construct. I want industrial power to be able to manufacture things that are precise, that function in precision, and industrial monopoly. And God said, okay, fair and fine, go and you shall be like that. And the German went, and we see Germans now, leading in industry, be it in car manufacture, be it in gun manufacture. The industry is up there. Why? Because of this parable of this satire. And we see America dominating, going into many countries, bombing, because according to this story, they were awarded the military might. Then the British also came, and God said, what shall I do to you, my son, the British? And the British said, for me, I just want power of governance. Power of governance. I don't want military power. I don't want industrial power. I just want power to be able to govern. And God said, okay, very well, it shall be so. And the British went in, and then we have the Commonwealth and the British Empire and things like that. They got that. And then the Chinese came also. And God said, what shall I do for you, my child, the Chinese? And the Chinese said, I just want technological power. And being able to, design and invent technology. And God said, oh, very fine, okay, go. My son, you can go and then do likewise. And then God came to the African and said, you African, my son, what can I do for you? Well, it is said, friends, that the African then replied and said, well, for me, please try not to worry. I did not come for anything. I was just accompanying others. Now, stories like these are told, a terrible indictment. They are told from the idea of identity and perception and roles and function. The reason why the African in this narrative, in this parody, in this satire, does not request anything from God, then suggests that it puts Africans on the roll. On the hierarchical structure of the world today, Africans are not on top. In the hierarchical structure of the world today, within where things are valued, we don't find Africans at the top of the echelon. And this comes in because we are living in a world where race becomes a form of identity. And the race does not just become a form of identity, does not become a structure of contempt, but race also becomes, it then formulates what we know as stereotypes. So if you are a black man, what are you? You are uneducated. Probably you are good at sports. Yeah, you are not good with your mind. Last but not least, you are violent and you are not trustworthy. These are stereotypes that come with blackness. You get into an elevator, and within this elevator there is an old white woman who's got a purse, and this purse there's $20,000 US. The moment you walk into the elevator, obviously, and this is instinct, the first thing that she does is she steps back, creates a room, and puts her hand on her purse. Why? Because the moment an African then steps into the elevator, he becomes an element of fear and threat. Stereotypes. It is not just Africans who have got negative stereotypes in the world today. When you get into an aeroplane and sit next to a guy who's dressed like Bin Laden coming from the Middle East, the journey will be very long. Why? Because in all the movies, the terrorists and the people who bring down planes and the people who bring down towers are not Africans. They are coming from the Middle East. And they say something in Arabic, or they say something, about jihad or assalamu alaikum and things like that. And boom, 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 things start to blow off. These are, friends, structures of contempt that comes in within identity. And why are we talking about this? We are talking about this because there was a certain man who had sons. They're forms of identity that is then constructed, and then it comes with stereotypes. So when you know your identity, that I am a black African, and God opens opportunities for you to go and study in Australia, in Russia, in Germany, because you know who you are and you have an identity. You know things to avoid and you know things not to avoid, because you are now acting out of compensatory behavior. There is something that is expected of you, and when you fail to perform, the stereotypes kick in. Oh, don't worry. So you're here. So you go to Germany as a black person. Germans are never late. You don't apologize for being late because no one is late. But when you're an African, they expect you to be late, and they understand that you're an African. It's not possible for you to be on time. Friends, this morning we are talking about formulation of identity and formulation of perception. Not just perception of others, but of self-perception. How do you view yourself? A certain man had sons. Those are forms of identity. Being an African, again, comes in and adds in on top of race. So, you are a man, you are a black man, but which one is then further classified? There's another group of better blacks who are known as black Americans. You can't put a black American on one scale and put a black African on another scale, and these come out weighing the same. There is even further classification. So when you're African, what then does that mean? It means that when you're African, you are primitive, you don't have social sophistication, you are not developed, you don't understand many things. I remember at a certain time I was attending a class on the philosophy of Kant, and prior to taking this course, I had been teaching ethics at the University of Solusi for a very long time, for the longest, yeah. So I understood back and forth the theory of Kant and his moral philosophy. So we are in this class and the lecturer goes in and talks about the philosophy of Kant, the moral philosophy of Kant, and goes on and goes on. So and as he was talking, he asked a question about categorical imperatives, and I highlighted categorical imperatives. And the lecturer, the professor, was confused. He said, no. How do you know these things? I thought you're from Africa. I thought you're from Africa, and I was not offended. Because this is the perception that is there. When you're coming from Africa, you don't understand these things. There is no social sophistication whatsoever. But here the Bible tells us that there is a man who had sons, then an identity that they could ascribe from the father, and there is a hierarchical structure. And within the hierarchical structure of the world today, friends, Africans are at the bottom. They don't understand sophisticated things. They are primitive. So the professor then asked me, how is it that you know categorical imperative? And I highlighted that, when we are back in Africa, when we are swinging from tree to tree like Tarzan, and when we are riding elephants, we'll be reciting Kant's categorical imperative. The professor was so thick in the head, he could not understand that I was making a joke, but I was trying to make him see. Says, okay, so how do you recite it? Do you read it in a book and then things like that? And then people laughed in the class because they understood the joke that I was trying to say. And I was trying to say in a nice way that even us Africans also understand these things that are deemed to be signs of social sophistication. What am I saying, friends? This morning, I'm trying to highlight to you as young people that we are now living in a global village where if you are coming from Africa, there are things that people are expecting from you. Please disappoint them, because you are more than an African. You are more than a black man. You are more than a black woman. You are more than an African. You are more than a man. Structures of contempt that has been put upon us by society must be destroyed. And when we have destroyed these conceptual frameworks, we must put in the framework that Jesus has ascribed on all of us. But before we go there, when you're also British, the narrative that then also changes. It means you're also trustworthy. It means that you're also civil, and then it means that you also have cash. But what is important here is not just the fact that the world perceives you in a certain way. What is important is how you also then perceive yourself. How do you see yourself? It's one thing to see others, but how do you see yourself? I'm thinking about when Jesus performed a miracle and healed the blind man, and he asked him, what do you see? And the person then said, I see people as trees. It's one thing to see others as trees, as thieves, as prostitutes, as untrustworthy. It's one thing. It's yet another in how you see yourself. Self-perception. A certain man had sons. They are forms of identity. Within these forms, I think people that are coming from other races and people coming from other continents and people that are coming from the global north are actually moderate in their negative view upon us in comparison with the view that we have on each other. It is us who repeats and repeatedly say, we are emphasizing the structure of contempt. It's okay to talk about racism, and it's bad to castigate racism. But what about tribalism? What about Afrophobia? When you go down south in Zanzi, it is not the white people who are perpetrating violence towards black people. It is black on black. When we talk about xenophobia, it's black on black. So within ourselves, there is a hatred we don't know where this hatred is coming from, but we think deep down ourselves, we have self-hate. We are a self-destructive people. We don't like our own. When we see our own striving, we want to make sure that our own stop striving, and we strike them by lightning and by thunderbolt to make sure that they don't strive. It is very, very difficult in Africa to share good news of what God has done for you. It is easy in Africa to share bad news. Many times, I don't know if you've done it, you want to type a message about what God has done in your life. After typing a message to send to friends in a group, then you think again, say, this message about the good things that God has done for me may be perceived in another way, and then you delete it. How many times have you gone on your Facebook page and you want to celebrate what God has done, and then you think twice and say, so many times, go and look at the likes, go and look at the hearts, go and look at the things that are celebrated on Facebook. People are there to cry with you when misfortune has happened. It never happens that people celebrate together the good things that God has done for you. Why? Because this identity crisis is a matter that needs to be deliberated on, and very early in your life, you need to have formulated a philosophy of identity and find who you are. Friends, I'm saying the things that then identify us, your gender identifies you. Apart from your gender, your race also identifies you. Where you come from also identifies you. By where you come from, if you are coming from Africa, we have highlighted that. If you are also coming in within your location, there are other forms of identity that then comes in. No, I don't in city center, but I know about ghetto. Yeah, that is another form of identity. Masala shoe. That again are forms and structures of identity. If you're an African woman, it then comes with stereotypes. And please do us a favor, don't live according to these stereotypes. An African woman is oppressed, she's weak, and she's a charity case. And you find many young people who are here, not just many young people, and there's nothing wrong with fighting for gender equality. But there are young people, young women, young men who have gone into this narrative of speaking of the African woman as oppressed, as weak, and as a charity case. These are identity forms, these are structures of contempt. Apart from your gender, apart from your race, friends, there is something that is called religion that also becomes a form of identity. A certain man had sons. These are structures of identity. In this narrative, you do not fit in if you are not a son of this father. What am I saying? I'm simply highlighting to you, friends, that identity is very, very important, and you need to structure identity so that you fit in with this narrative. And let me go ahead as we near the conclusion and highlight that within this narrative, when it says the certain men had sons, and remember it's a parable, define a parable, it's an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. A certain man who's being talked about here is God. It's not important in how God looks at you, but it can be reconciled in how you look at yourself, the perception that you have for yourself. God then says to you, I've bought you with a price. But the very thing that has been bought, the very person who has been bought with a great price, have a perception of something that is useless. And this, friends, how you see yourself determines the value you put yourself. And no one can ever treat you in a better way than you treat yourself. If you want people to treat you nicely, then learn to treat yourself nicely. If you want people to put value on your life, then you must be the first person to put value in your life. People not put value on that which has already devalued itself. A certain man had sons. We are all children of God. We are the sheep of his pasture. Within this identity, whether as an African, as a man, as a woman, do you fit in? Last but not least, not even last, the issue of religion also then comes in as an identity structure. Why? Because the religion then talks about matters of the heart. What we talked about, race and gender, are matters that are outward appearance. Matters of the heart are also matters that then also become an identity feature. Heart, your heart, where your religion is. Religion is a form of identity. So when you are working, or whenever you are, wherever you may be, they'll say, who are you talking about? Oh, we're talking about that guy. Oh, you're talking about that young lady. Which one? That one. That one who lives in Borodin. Oh, okay. No, I'm not sure which one. Not the Adventist. That Adventist. Yeah, she's good. Which one? Oh, I didn't know she was. Because religion also becomes a form of identity. And yesterday, remember, we talked about even being an Adventist, it's the seventh day for Adventists, because there are 4 Adventists in each and every Adventist church. You have your conservatives, you have your liberals, you've got your historical Adventists, you've got your progressive Adventists. All these are forms that then give identity. If you are historical and if you are conservatives, sometimes there are also structures of contempt. Ma holier than thou, ma holier than thou. These are things that then also gives in identity. So when you so decide to choose a religion, remember that the religion becomes also an ascribing of identity. We have talked about gender, we have talked about race, we've talked about location, we've talked about the religion as ascribing behavior. Friends, a certain man had sons. Within the family of God, with your identity, will you fit in as a son of God? He came unto his own, but his own received him not. But to those that received him, he gave them power to be called sons and daughters of God. This morning we are talking about identity. Identity that comes in from sex, identity that comes in from gender, identity that comes in from location, and identity that comes in from religion. Your religion defines who you are. How you practice your religion also defines who you are. And it's not just the religion that then defines who you are, friends, but what you also do with your hands then also defines who you are. So for you to be you, it's not a matter of just being born in a good family. It's not a matter of your gender. It's an interconnection, and it's a network of many things. What are those things? Some of those things you have nothing to do with them. They are beyond your control. I've highlighted. You are born with this gender. You are born with this gender. You are born within this race. You are born within this location. There's nothing that you can do about that. There is something that you can do about your religion. Your belief structure should be at the top. As you are formulating who you are, the first thing that you need to decide upon are matters of the heart. Your religion, your belief structure is very, very important in structuring identity. Apart from choosing your religion. And there are some people whom their identity is solely in their religion. Their religion is higher. Their denomination is higher than their gender. Their denomination is higher than their location. Their denomination is higher than their race. I'm Sabbath. Religion then dominates identity or forms of identity. Apart from religion, I said you must decide very early on the religion identifying you. Ukangonzora impostori zvine zvazvotoreva. Zvine behavior, zvine expected behavior, zvine stereotypes, zvitori ne framework yazvo. Ukanzora muSabata, zvonzi I'm Catholic, I'm Anglican, I'm thinking of that joke. Ukanzora mwana wangu kana ndafa pakauya apa. Viga chakati, pakauya apa, viga chakati, pakauya apa, viga chakati. So religion and church and denominations are very, very important for you as a young person to formulate your identity. And you need to choose very early in your life, especially in these days of your youth, to invest on religious things, because they also then shape the identity that is then ascribed for you. I think the second thing that is important, which you can do, you have power of choice to decide on these things, is the issue to do with what you do with your hands, your profession. Heart are religious things. Hands are professional things. What you do with your hands, we are talking about career is an identity. A certain man had sons. takubva pasane pakonzi anoitei mwana wacho, he's a lawyer, that is a form of identity. No, he's an accountant, that is a form of identity. No, ndimakanika mngomana we, that's a form of identity. No, she's a nurse, that is a form of identity. She's an entrepreneur, that is a form of identity. She's an accountant, it's a form of identity. She's also a doctor, it's a form of identity. And the pastor, it's a form of identity. So there are two things that you can decide on very early as a young person that then helps to formulate and sediment your identity. First is your religion. Mwari wako anoita kuti uzikame kuti uri wani. A certain man had sons. Chechipiri, basa raunoita. And basa raunoita rinotibatsira kuti tiku-identify kuti ndeupo wacho amurota kuti aiwa lawyer wewe mamukanga mwaere. It also becomes a form of identity. Last but not least, muri yekwaunobva, tanga tataura muri kwainobva. But then also, there are other forms that then come in to play an important role. These forms are your associations. And we are they also become forms of identity. Birds of the same feather always flock together. But apart from friends, the people that you fall in love with, your boyfriend, your girlfriend. Kune wamwe wanu wakadanana newanu wekuti nhasi unozvikazikama kuti makadanana munhu anoshaya pekupinda nekunyara. Why? Because it's not just about falling in love. It also becomes that why? Because you need to be careful about the people that you choose to give your heart, because they will be identified with you and you'll be identified with them. Birds of the same feather flock together. Saka ndiani tukutaura Grace kam nigirikini Grace mamukanga Grace musikana wa Joseph. Identity. So munhu waunodana naye is also identified with you. So association, friends, is very, very important. Boyfriend yanengi, girlfriend yanengi. Lovers are identifying features. So you are then identified together. So self-perception in a world full of limiting factors is very, very important. So what are we talking about? Let me conclude by highlighting that, friends, kungonzuri baba zvinotolimita. If certain men had sons, kunzi uri mwana zvinotolimita. Have you not heard many times fathers and mothers shouting within the house, "What are you?" They are saying, no. Your role is a son. How come you come at 2 a.m.? Because you are not the father of the house. Because of the fact that you are a son. So when you are a father, there are things that are expected. Sons are not expected to pay rent. Sons are not expected to be buying food. Sons are not expected to be paying fees. That is a role that is identified with fathers. When you are a son, firstborn, there are rules and responsible things that then come with that ascribing. When you are firstborn, it means you are responsible. Do you know guide? And it's not to my firstborn, assistant parents. Assistant parents, because when fathers and mothers are not there, who takes in responsibility? It is the firstborn. So when a certain man had sons, there are roles and responsibilities that then comes with that. It means, you are firstborn, it means you are mature, you have experience, you can guide the young ones. It also comes with expected roles and expected duties. So you can say, you are weak, you need guidance. It also means you have inexperience. That these things comes in with a factor. So now, why are we saying this? I'm highlighting that within these frameworks of fathers and sons, there are limitations. Within the framework of sons and fathers, there are limitations. Each and every identity feature has limitations. Ukanzi, he's a black man. You have limitations. Kungonzi, you're a black man, it comes with limitations that come with perceptions. Kungonzi, my youth, it comes also with forms of identity and it comes with limiting factors. Kungonzi, it comes with forms of identity and expected behavior. It It comes with the identity of being a boy. It comes with the identity of being a girl. Kana muchifamba nemusikana ukanzi kwakutonhora mukomana chai anobvisa badge opowa musikana nokuti kutonhora kuchinairira. It comes with identity. There are expected behaviors. And a certain man had sons. Hey, he came unto his own, and his own received him not. But to those that received him, he gave them the power to be called sons and daughters of God. We have a higher identity, that which we can be identified with as sons and daughters of God. Girls are not courageous. They cry when they are happy. They cry when they are sad. They cry when they just want to cry. It comes with being a girl. These are stereotypes that then come with identity. As you are trying to find who you are in this world, you need to then understand the frames that have been created, social constructions, and understand these social constructions and find and navigate yourself within the business of finding identity. Let me conclude and say, friends, if you want to be an ordinary person and die peacefully for the rest of your life, then don't negotiate with forms of identity created by society. Don't negotiate. Fit into the identity narrative that is created by society. Wakomana are heartless, they don't cry. Girls are weak, boys are strong. Not fair. A life that is not successful, but a life that is not a life of failure. Don't negotiate with the friends of identity, and those don't cross these boundaries. The boundary of being a father, the boundary of being a brother, the boundary of being the last born. When you go out of these boundaries, either you become successful or you become a successful failure. In this narrative, friends, let me conclude by saying, in this narrative, the father and his sons are limited by a frame that is called inheritance. Despite their difference in duties and in their roles, there is something that is binding them together, and they cannot extricate themselves out of it. They're in the prison of this boundary. And what is this boundary? It's a boundary that is called inheritance. It comes ascribed with the rules and regulations. And the rules and regulations of inheritance says, Naka inogovewa munwabda kufa. Before death, vana vako ngavakwangwaye, ngavatambure, iwe wakangobata naka. Musuwa unozonzi wafa. That's the day that they will distribute it. That rule binds fathers. But now are bound by this rule that says naka ikumbirikana ukatambura ukaita nzara zvekukanga waya. You cannot go to your father and say, give me inheritance, because when you say that, you're wishing your father to die. In their different roles and in their different duties and in their different identities, they have got a limiting factor, and this limiting factor is a factor that they've imitated from society that says there are rules that then governs behavior. And this rule is a limiting factor. And as they imitate this rule, they become normal within society. But this morning we are talking about imitation is limitation. That is to say, if you are ever imitating society, you are limiting yourself. Because there is never a point when we imitate and become original. I'm thinking about John Mason, who wrote a book, You Are Born an Original, Don't Die a Copy. One of the things that affect us as young people is we are ever copying and never finding who we are. We are everything that is out there and we are nothing of ourselves, because we want to copy others and become and live according to the frames that have been dictated by society. You live according to the behavior that is expected of your gender. Why? Because you don't want to shock the world. You don't want to negotiate. You don't want to have a conversation and negotiate and contrast identity forms that have been put. Gender limitations. I'm saying to you girls, don't live according to the ascribed limiting factors of gender. There are areas that are said that these are areas of men. When Christ comes and gives you a new gender, you must be able in of yourself to go and into these enchanted grounds and make a name for yourself. Don't live up to the unfair limitations that have been put up by society. What we need in this world today is women that are strong. Society tells us that women are weak, women cry for nothing. But Jesus comes in and says, no, don't live up according to that structure that is put by society. Those that are called by my name are women that are as strong as Deborah. Women who have got roles and duties. Women who contribute on things that are of eternal value. Women who contribute to society and women who contribute within their families. That is the need for the world today. And today's young girl is a girl who comes in, who has value that surpasses what is between her legs. Value that has been put on her by Jesus Christ. Value that says, I am a human being, I'm more than a sexual object. The moment you perceive yourself like that, you are negotiating with frames and you are negotiating, you are pathing, you are breaking a path to your success. You are saying, this is the normal, but I want to negotiate with the normal and construct a new identity, an identity that comes in from Christ. An identity for a young man who, when they see a young woman, they don't see a sexual object. When they see a young woman, they see a young girl, they see a sister, they see a fellow human being whom we can join hands together and construct characters that befit heaven. What I'm saying, friends, is we must refuse structures that have been put on us. Limiting structures that says you are an African. Ghetto. Ghetto ngachibude disappoint people who have put in limiting factors upon you. Limiting factors are conclusions that have been written about your life because of your condition. And this morning I'm saying, your condition is not your conclusion. Because we are in this condition, that is not your conclusion. Write another script, a script that is written by the word of the Alpha and the Omega. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The role of Jesus in your life as a young person is to construct an identity that befits your life in heaven, an identity that befits your life here on earth, a successful life here on earth. Vakomana should be heartless. They should be strong. That is not the world for the need to, this is not the need for the world today. When Jesus has come in and has ascribed a new identity in your life, he then says to you as a young man, can I just arm more? Be a young man who's strong and courageous, but a young man who's not heartless, who also feels for others, who's also hurried by the feelings and the infirmities of others. A young man who feels for others. That is the identity that is needed for the world today. There are limiting factors that comes with the identity that the world has put on us. You are an African, you are a black man, you are down. Masala these are limiting factors. But let us be like Tiger Woods. Let us be like Lewis Hamilton. Let us be like Michael Jackson, who go into these structures and pull down the structures and say, a black young girl can stand up and win all and break all the records in Wimbledon. A young man can drive so fast as a black man and break all the records that have been set. A young black man can rise up and sing and dance better than everyone. All I'm saying is, don't live according to the limiting factors that has been put upon you by society. Black on black crime. You must make a decision to say, I'll never harm another black person and I'll never speak ill of another black person. It does not start with the newspaper. It does not start with the magazine. It starts with you to say, I will not live according to the limiting factors that has been put upon us. I will not give up on fellow blacks. No matter how much they can disappoint me, I'll never give up on fellow blacks. I'll never give up on fellow Africans. I'll never pull down another African because it is not for us. Someone then said, every time when I fight for black people, I fight with one hand and the other hand is defending myself from those that I'm fighting for. We all of us have PhDs without ever going to university. This PhD is not in terms of a doctoral qualification, but all of us are qualified in the pulling down syndrome and pull it down syndrome. White people don't need to fight black people. They can just leave black people to do that on their behalf. We are in the business of fighting our own. We hate our own. At the first onset, you fight them. A fellow Adventist, you fight them. Your own cousin, you fight them. We fight our own. Yet there are others who are doing worse off and will never raise a hand, will never raise a finger, will never raise a word against those. Why? Because there are frameworks that have been put upon us to say, factors that come through career. Career also has limiting factors. But we're living in a world where those who are masters of two different areas, now you can't get to Harvard University and get a place if you are not a master in 3 areas. You have to be a lawyer, you have to be a journalist, you have to be an accountant, exceptionally good in these areas. And if you have accounts, it's an added advantage. Don't be limited by factors. What you focus on must not limit you. It's good to be focused in life, friends. It's good because it gives you direction. But your focus must never blind you. I'm thinking about the gorilla experiment which was done. They take a young man and they're doing this experiment, and then there are 5 people who are tamizana basketball, bounce a basketball, and bounce a basketball, yeah. And then the young man is told, no doubt bora rava pananingirika tendera kangani. So as they concentrate on looking at how the ball is passed from the players going to that, as you count, on the right, 27 times. Yeah, this is what going 27 times. But coach gorilla chapinda chikafamba bwachona. Gorilla? Hapana gorilla ambofamba. Ozo chira tizwa video no. Kuti gorilla chayo chikaruwa chest chikasunza maoko chikaenda. How is it that you didn't see the gorilla? You could not see the gorilla because you were focusing on how many times the ball has rotated. So what am I saying, friends? I'm saying limitations helps us to focus, but focus must not be able to blind us. What we must do, friends, is we must do like the other son who said to the father, give me that which shall be mine. To go against the norms that have been created, the unjust norms that have been created, to go and say, there is something that is mine. Society says I can't ask for it because it means this, but I need what is mine. Give me that which shall be mine. The father now is in a position to also give, because even if he wanted, then it would mean that he would have deemed his sons weak. This morning I want to encourage you as young people, let us cross the boundaries of limitations. As we cross these boundaries of limitations, let us remember there is a price to pay. And there are returns. If you are going to engage into premarital sex, you are crossing a boundary that also has prices to pay. Teenage pregnancies, sexually transmitted diseases, disrepute of name, loss of dignity, loss of discipline, becoming a laughing stock. Every time we cross a boundary, there is a price to pay. I'm saying, friends, let us cross the boundaries, the unjust boundaries that have been put to limit us. The Bible, and it is Philippians chapter 2 verse 5, the Bible reminds us, let this mind be in you which was also in Christ Jesus. May you have an identity that is of Christ Jesus. To be a son of the Father, to be the father of the sons are limiting factors. The unlimiting factor is we have a Father who's in heaven, and all of us are called sons and daughters of God. And if we are to formulate identity, it must come from an unlimiting factor, the identity that is ascribed for us by heaven. Friends, you are more than what you believe. You are more than your career. You are more than your race. You are more than your gender. You are more than your profession. You are more than the Bible verses that you know. Why? Because you are a child of God. May bless you as we contemplate on this concept of crossing the boundaries, knowing that what we imitate limits us, and what limits us is imitated by others. God bless you. Until we meet again tomorrow, stay safe.
Trust the sweetest frame.